lazy DIYers, welcome back to the Jenny Morel channel. I'm going to be showing you some easy tips to turn this into this. If you've ever thought about tiling a kitchen, obviously it's very expensive. I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to redo your whole kitchen. Anyone could do it. Was it easy to do? Yes. Did it take that long? Not really. A little bit of scrubbing, bit of peeling, bit of sticking, bit of cutting, and we're good to go. So before I show you how it's done, my only concern during this was, as it is a sort of sticky back plastic, is it going to be durable? Will it last? So I will give you my verdict on both the products that I used and how I used them at the end. Without further ado, this is how I did it.
First, you will need sugar soap and a normal sponge, and also a Brillo sponge, but the plastic type, a bowl of hot water with a bit of fairy liquid in it. So begin by clearing your surface top and removing all plugs from sockets. If you're going to keep the electric on, just be careful that you don't spray too much water or sugar spray near the sockets. Maybe just spray it straight onto the Brillo pad or the sponge before applying it to the surface, and then work your way around from then. You'll be able to wipe over the tiles, and if you can still see dirt, then you need to give it another good scrub. If we were going to paint over these tiles with a special tile paint, then after the clean I would say you would have to sand them down and rough up the edges. However, in this case we're just doing stick-on tiles, so you can just wash the surface down. So yeah, and then I would finish off and wipe down with a tea towel. So once your surface is clean, then we can get into it. So I'm just drying off the tiles. However, when you look at the tea towel when you finished, if it still looks dirty like mine did, I thought I might need a bit of Sillet Bang. I'm not promoting, but it is very good, and there's a couple of greasy marks at the top left corner, so it's really good for that. Right, so now your surface is nice and clean, you will need scissors and your tiles. Maybe a ruler or something just to flatten it out, or a credit card. So first is to peel the back off. This can be a bit fiddly. I had two types of tiles. One tile you just peeled the back off. However, the other brand, you had a little transparent film on the front. So just be careful that once you put the tile on, they might look like they're peeling off because you have a transparent film to go with it. When you get to the plug sockets can be very tricky. Ideally you should try and measure around it and just cut it into place. Always cut less than you think, just so you can slowly trim it off. Ideally, if you could switch the electric off and pull the plug out, then you can just sort of tile slightly behind it, which would be for best results. However, in my case, this wasn't an option, so just be careful when cutting around the socket. Otherwise, you end up with boo-boos like this, where it overlaps slightly, so not ideal. Now it's time to show you how I went from this and turned it into this. Start by taking all the cabinet doors off by unscrewing each bracket. I did do this by myself. However, if you have someone who can hold the cabinet door to support it so it doesn't bend the bracket, that would be best. Any screws, hinges, nuts and bolts, handles, try and put them in like a little bowl where you can keep them all together. this little screw slash hook, so it screws into the door and it's got a little hook and it helps you sort of hook it back on. It will help you later for positioning the door better once it's all sort of popped back on. After that, then you're going to want to take off the handle, remove it, one for cleaning, and two, you're going to need a flat surface to apply your fablon. So the handles came up spick and span with a little bit of scrub, basically just a bit of fairy liquid and a normal sponge or a Brillo pad. It came out really good. If that all fails, then a little bit of sugar soap may help also. Next, you want to grab the cabinet doors and bring them in the bathroom and basically scrub all years of grease away. This is a picture you can see the comparison, the before and after. It was immensely filthy. So once your cabinet's been dried off, you want to lay it down on a soft surface for protection and then look to measure up the fablon against the panel. It has got a grid system on the back, which also helps with the measuring. Ideally, you would get a ruler and measure the exact circumference of the surface it helped. However, always leave that little bit extra. Ideally, you want to cut it a couple of centimetres wider. As you'll find when you're applying the fablon, sometimes the angle's not perfect and it may not reach the edges, so you are looking for half an inch, let's say, thicker all the way around to make sure it covers your back if the placement isn't quite perfect. Once you've cut your fablon, turn the sheet over so the grid is facing down. Just peel a tiny corner off and then line up the fablon exactly where you want it before attaching the sticky side of the corner down. Now for the very fiddly part. Once the corner's attached, you want to lift the rest of the fablon up and just grab the underneath grid sheet, and what you're going to do is slowly pull it back, as with one hand you are flattening out the surface to ensure there is no bubbles, and with the other hand you're slowly peeling the back of the fablon off. This is a hand and coordination issue. I would suggest to go slower than you can see in the video, just to ensure you don't get any bubbles. It is difficult. Try to go as slow and as steady and as smooth as possible, because if you get bubbles and you want to pull a bit of it off, it can be very tricky. It is very difficult to pull back off. And also, if you pull too hard in certain areas, you can stretch the material, which will leave it bubbly anyway. So this bit is a real eye-hand coordination and patience recommended. So at first I did have my palm down and I was running my hand and fingers across the edge to smooth the fablon over. However, I did find that if I clenched my fist and used my knuckles, I found that a bit easier to smooth it over, but at the end of the day it's whatever works for you. Fablon do sell, and you can get this from sort of B&Q or anywhere that sells fablon. They do have like a little spatula that can assist in making it smoother so you're not left with bubbles like this. With a lot of effort and time, you can get these bubbles out. However, they are quite stubborn, it is hard work, and I wouldn't recommend it. Next, taking a screwdriver, you want to find the holes for the handle and pierce them using the screwdriver. Next, you will need some kind of cutting, craft knife, Stanley knife, scalpel. This is to cut off the overlap of the edge to make it lovely and neat. Make sure you've got some cardboard or like one of those crafty rubber mats underneath so you don't cut into a table or a floor. Pop the handle back on and then pop the cabinet back onto the cabinet door, and we're ready to roll. Without further ado, these are my before and after pictures. Enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. I will now give you a review of the products I used and where you can buy them from. So I used a product called Avell. However, I bought them from two different places. One was eBay and one was Amazon. The ones that came from eBay, I feel like they were a rip-off version. They were a lot thinner than the other version I used, which had the extra film on the top. So I would definitely recommend to buy the ones from Amazon because they are higher quality and they're solid, especially if you're trying to place a tile over a tile that's already got a raised surface like mine. These were a bit bubbly. So on reviewing the tiles, it has been 3 months since I've put them on. They are looking in pretty good shape, to be honest. This is a kitchen that is shared with 4 people during quarantine, so it's had much use 3 times a day, and it's come out quite good. There's a tiny little bit down by the cooker that could do with a review. On the whole, it's been a fabulous low budget kitchen hack. So thank you for joining me for this journey. I hope you liked the video. Do hit the subscribe button if you can, and if you're interested in my review on Huel and perhaps some other products like Herbalife, meal replacements in general, do stay tuned for that. And finally, I'll be doing some short hack videos on wedding tips, wedding hacks. Just stay tuned if you want to know more. Okay, for now, that's me.